Hello, I'm Terry Kolath. I'm here today with President Emeritus Peter Dice. Peter Dice, if you have not had the opportunity to meet him, has been president of Shell Point for many of our 50 years. And we are celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year, and we can't think of a better way to kind of keep the momentum going than to hear about our history from the man who not only led the community, but lived through so much time here. Thank you for joining me, Peter.
It's a pleasure.
First of all, I have never seen you without a coat and tie, and I think retirement must be agreeing with you.
Well, I feel kind of vulnerable without a tie, but it is nice to not have the burden, even though I enjoyed it for 30-plus years.
Well, it was obvious. And now we're going to be able to see some of the enjoyment. I have seen your 50-year history before, and it is worth seeing again, because the times you lived through and the liveliness you can bring to those photographs on the big screen are so valuable. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of our time here at Shell Point, what it looked like. I've heard the word moonscape.
Well, we cover some pictures that go back to those early days. Actually, I think the earliest one I have is 1944, where it's very virgin territory, and some insist it's just as God created it, nothing has happened since that time. But there are a number of things that have happened, and I think it's very interesting to sort of recollect those things and to keep them before our eyes. And I've always enjoyed the history because I think it's such a valuable thing for our residents to understand the shoulders on which we now stand, that give us a good indication of our responsibilities in the future. And to see the step of faith that a denomination and some visionaries made and the fruition of a product that you see here today is a very interesting trail. And along the way, there are many little paths that you can follow. So I find it interesting, having been on the board 5 years before I assumed the position in 1985, and being able to talk with many of the people who sweat blood and tears in those early years. That has made a great impression on me, and I hope it stays with the organization as a whole.
And as our home, people who have moved to Shell Point, our home community, and to be able to actually see how it grew through amazing challenges with zoning. And I mean, at one point I remember you saying something like we had to create a center for waste. I mean, just things you wouldn't even consider. And when you think of how that area was filled in and grew, and could never happen today, right?
Right. If you look at existing laws and regulations, the likelihood of doing something here is very, very small. Back at the time when it did happen, fortunately, I guess, there weren't those regulations that allowed us to do this. However, in that process, I think it's also impressive to see that Shell Point has been very concerned about what God has given us in the form of nature and the beauty that's around us. And we made a conscious effort through all these years to be as preservative as we can of the natural resources and to live in harmony with the beauty that's around us, the birds. And walking into the studio today, I see 10 manatee in the canal. I mean, people pay to come and see that, and we give it free.
A benefit of living at Shell Point. It's fabulous. Well, as we come to this program, I mean, some of us will certainly want to see it again, but so many new residents have never had the opportunity. What can we expect besides looking at the photos?
Well, I think a couple things. One is I think you can expect to see Shell Point in a perspective that is more than what you see as it is today. Yes. And I think that many have said it in more eloquent terms, but if you don't understand our history, you can't appreciate our presence. And not only that, the value of the history we make as another generation, just like those who have come behind us. But I've tried to gather just a number of pictures, not all of them in sequence, but close to it, along with some interesting things that have come along that I happen to remember or affected us. And then at the end, I always enjoy trying to answer questions, because if I can answer questions, I can scratch people where they itch.
Yeah, and the questions, I can imagine. Having been here an employee for so long of Shell Point, somebody new might have quite a few questions, and it's wonderful that we have an opportunity. Talking about standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us, we'll have the opportunity to talk to one right in this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to sharing the wonderful story of Shell Point.
March 16th, the Village Church, which means there's room for all. You are all welcome to take this opportunity with President Emeritus Peter Dice, the history of Shell Point, 50 years.